everyone. I'm Danny. I work at GitHub. Before we really start, this is everyone. Before we start, let's make sure the camera's turned on. Is it on?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So before I get started, does everyone know what we do at GitHub? No one. I gave this talk in London, and half the hands, no one knew what we were, so it's kind of awkward because this kind of relies on this. Yeah, no one needs explaining. Awesome. That makes my job kind of easy. So as you know, we kind of make a collaboration tool online, right? We try to lower the barrier for entry for collaborating with code. And that's a big thing that we do. But we also developed quite a cool way to actually build software whilst we were doing this, and it kind of centers around the product that we made. And inspired by this kind of experience building GitHub.com, we started building native apps. But we tried to apply these principles to native development. The same kind of principles that we use to drive our web development. And a lot of them aren't traditionally used in kind of iOS apps or Mac apps. So I figured I'd talk a bit about some of these principles and then also get into some specifics of how we work. Because I think it's kind of a cool way just to build software in general. And it can apply to iOS and Mac apps in just the same way that it applies to a big web deployment. So the first kind of principle I want to talk about is just it's kind of what you ship early and ship often. I think a lot of people say this, but not many people actually do it. But we really like to ship early and ship often. I mean, on GitHub.com we deploy anything between 7 and 30 times a day to production, new code. And that's something which is obviously very foreign from iOS, Mac, because I mean, that's insane, right? We'd have to be reviewed 40 times a day, and I can't imagine anything worse. But you can still take these principles, right? And especially shipping early, because people tend to get really scared about shipping early. You know, oh man, people are going to want more features. They're not going to like this. They're not going to use it this way. And really, no matter what you ship, someone's going to want something more. And until you get your product out there and in the wild, you have no real idea as to how people are really going to use it. You know how you think they're going to use it, but you don't really know. So getting a product out there and having users on it is a great idea just to get metrics on your application and see how people start to use it. You'd probably be surprised as to what they do. Our Mac app is a perfect example of it, to be honest, in terms of shipping early. I think everyone would be, it's kind of obvious that it doesn't do everything that we want it to do. But we got it out there and we already have over 100,000 users that use it on a daily basis and kind of give us feedback on what needs to be improved. And we like to think it is improving at quite a rapid pace because we shipped it. So the second part I kind of want to dive into more a little bit, kind of bash it home, is to be iterative. I mentioned we ship 730 times a day in .com. It's really something we don't like this big barrier to entry in terms of being able to deploy loads. And it's important to keep continuously improving your product and keep improving your code. I think those are two very key things. So it's not just in terms of iterating on new features and new bug fixes, but in terms of always your architecture. I think people tend to worry about these sort of big 2.0 releases and completely re-architecting your application. It's like, I swear the other day I saw, again, someone said, announced their big 2.0 version of the app, and they proudly announced that it was completely rewritten from scratch. I thought that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. And I hear it all the time. People are like proud of this. Our version 1 sucked so bad that we had to rewrite everything from scratch. It's not something that I feel is a good thing to brag about. And if you're continuously iterating on your code, you get a better product. I've been involved in don't worry, they're loud, it's fine. I've been involved in a few like big 2.0 rewrites, and the whole idea with this is like, oh, we've got this crafty code base, and then we'll rewrite it and it'll be absolutely fine, it'll be perfect. And no, of course it wasn't. Because by the time we actually shipped, the thing had changed so much, the code base was just as bad as the 1.0 one that we were replacing. So it was a complete wasted exercise. But if you're continuously looking at your code base whilst you're iterating and thinking of ways it can improve, you end up with a much more solid architecture because of it. And iterating I think is better for users as well, not just developers. Because I kind of think version numbers suck. I think it's this ridiculous notion that a user needs to know of the version number of the software they're using. At what point did we think it's a great idea that the user thinks, yes, I'm using Photoshop version 3.79b, and therefore I must use this, that, or the other. It's ridiculous. Now people use websites every day, and at no point does anyone say, oh, this is GitHub version 32.9000. No one really bothers, unless they're using Facebook. Apparently, if it's Facebook, they really care. The timeline. So I really think we should deprecate version numbers as a whole. There will never be a GitHub for Mac 2.0, because I like to think that we'll never be at a point where we're not just continuously iterating on something, continuously improving it. I'm aware that this doesn't tend to gel so well in how Apple deems that we should be versioning our software, but I feel like that's an argument for a different day. So, next bit. I don't really want to talk about this slide too much. I kind of think this should get hammered home. Unit test. This is something that, working at a company like GitHub, where we kind of, ostensibly we're this big Ruby on Rails shop, right? But we have, Windows devs, Java devs, like, we all kind of cross-pollinate. And there's kind of one culture which we don't kind of unit test, and that's Objective-C and Cocoa. Like, I came from Objective-C and Cocoa, and there's like this big kind of, I don't know about downer on it, but no one really seems to unit test. And it's bizarre, because you go in every other community in the world, essentially, development community, and unit testing is a big thing. And it's because it's great. We're starting to really get good coverage on the Mac app right now, especially with Git interactions. It's saved up bacon so many times. I can't say this enough. And unit tests are getting better in Xcode 4, for sure. It's better than Xcode 3. And there's some good frameworks out there. As we get more developers coming in from the likes of the Ruby community, bringing in good influences from that side, we're starting to get some good tools for it. So at this point, I don't really feel like there's an excuse not to. And make sure you're set up continuously running them, right? Continuous integration, again, is I think something which is not a big deal in Cocoa, and it really should be. Because having a system where no matter what I do, I write code, I push it up to GitHub, and then an entire robot system builds my code, runs unit tests, and then shouts at me if I messed up. That's kind of great, because if there's anything I don't want to do is let down the robot, because he gets angry and shouts at me. We actually use a system called Janky, which we kind of built ourselves on top of something called Jenkins. If you haven't used continuous integration before, check this out. It integrates with things like Campfire and stuff like that to basically shout at you if you mess things up. Because that sometimes is the kick you need, right? The more you automate, the less you have to remember to do, and the more you're just winning, right? So we're getting into more specifics of how we kind of work in every day. I see a lot of talk about various branching systems in Git. Funny enough, Git's a big part of what we do at GitHub. And when it comes down to it, our branching scheme is kind of really simple. My hilarious keynote drawing is not coming up too well. What we tend to have is we just have one master branch, right? There's one master branch, and if you want to do anything, you branch off it. You never commit directly to master. It's pretty simple. That's it. It's the whole point. It's kind of because we want to avoid what we call shit work. I've seen certain systems say like Git Flow. I used Git Flow for like a couple of years and thought it was the thing, right? The greatest thing in the world. But then when you realize it, all you're doing is just spending more time managing your branches in your code than you are actually coding. It's like, oh, is it a feature request? Is it a hotfix? But if it's a hotfix, it has to come off master and not development. But then if it's development, I need to do this, which is complete rubbish, right? No one needs that. Git is so smart that all you need to do is have one branch and do everything you want in another one, and then merge it back in. Simple, right? But we have a process involved in merging it back in. It's not that simple. We have what we call a pull request. Do people use pull requests here? Like, yes, awesome. So some people, I guess, will use them into open source projects. If you have forks, the concept is you fork a project, you make some alterations, and then you submit a pull request to say, hey, I did some cool things. You may want to put this in the project, right? But not many people know that you can actually do it internal to a project in GitHub. It's not just cross-repository. It can be internal into a repository, cross branches. And they're useful because they have a whole bunch of stuff in them. I tried to make a screenshot that worked at this resolution, but it didn't. And it turns out it didn't really need to worry about the resolution of the slide. But a pull request is more than just like a lump of code, right? We give you a great user interface for managing it. There's a description, there's commits, there's a diff, and then there's, more importantly, a comment thread. There's a discussion about the code. And what we tend to do is we even pull requests before the code's ready. We'll just pull requests straight up. And that means that you, if you're interested in this kind of the work that's being done, you can start a discussion about the code. And it's all documented right there. And you can see new commits as they come up. You can comment on individual lines, and they'll all show up in that comment thread. And so you can discuss, you can essentially code review without all the suck. There's no need to bring someone into a meeting and then have a really passive-aggressive conversation about why they shouldn't possibly do this way because maybe it's not quite the right coding style. You just talk about it, and it's fine. And what you find is if you have this architecture, right, that if the only way back into master is via a pull request, suddenly the state of code in master is pretty cool, right? Because anything in this master branch I know has been pull requested and therefore peer-reviewed, which is kind of awesome. And so therefore, to get your code into master and get it shipped, you need to go through a pull request. And it's just this natural kind of way of building up a sort of a defense of kind of quality code. And then what you find is they have this term when you're working on .com or GitHub, which is master is always deployable. And this is when I say we deploy 7 to 30 times a day. That's because someone merges a pull request and just deploys it straight away out of .com. And you're running that code when you're running GitHub. You're running brand new code that's just constantly getting better and better and better. Or in some cases really bad, and then we just roll it back. But most of the time better and better and better. But I'm kind of going to bastardize this term to make it Mac and iOS compatible and say master is always shippable. And this is the term that we've sort of kind of coined on the Mac team. And that at any point I can just kind of feel like I come into work and go, we haven't shipped for a little while, let's just ship. And I should be able to just take that state of master and just put it out in public. Not even have to worry about it, right? Or in some cases submit to the App Store. That should be a possibility at any point on master because it builds, hopefully, it passes all tests and it's been peer reviewed, but not in a sucky way. But just because it's shippable, it doesn't mean to say you should have to do something about shipping. You should automate your ship. If you have a continuous integration set up, there's no reason that you should have to do any more work to ship something. Because if you look, our entire process is kind of defensive, right? You can't commit directly to master. It has to go through people. We have continuous integration setups to shout you if you mess up. It's all to be defensive. Stop, Sandy. Do you have something to say? Cool. It's all to be defensive and make sure the quality code in master is as good as we want it to be. So the second you add another step outside of these defenses to what you're doing, you're basically completely invalidating it. So what you find in a lot of cases is someone's like, there's that one guy, there's Jim in the office, he knows the things you have to do to submit the app to the App Store, right? There's like a script you have to run and then you chant to the App Store daemons and then ship it, which is ridiculous. Because suddenly it's not automated, suddenly there's an entire new area that your system can fail in. So it should be automated. You should literally be able to click a button, or in our case we issue a qbot command, and it just deploys, right? Straight to the and submits to the App Store. There are ways you can do it, trust me. It's kind of interesting with Connect, but it works. And that's the whole idea, right? Because not only if you automate your ship, are you removing all this kind of area for messing up, but it makes shipping easy, right? And that's because shipping's awesome. It sounds bizarre to say it like this, but at GitHub we really encourage shipping, right? Shipping is a big deal. Every time someone ships, we give them lots of congrats and campfire. We make a big deal out of it. This is how we encourage it. And I think if you go to a lot of other companies, there's an essence of fear about shipping. There's this, oh shit, did we put enough in this review? Oh, is that horrible bug? Oh, we submitted the App Store and then there's another bug that's just appeared. Oh god, no, what the hell? But shipping's incredible. This is what we do. We ship code to people. And at no point should there be any essence of fear or loathing about the whole process, right? Because at the end of the day, as much as you want to program yourself, the only thing that matters is the code that people are using. So if there's more of a barrier between that, then that kind of sucks. You should really encourage shipping. Do it more often. Celebrate it when it happens. Go out, get beers for anyone who just shipped. It's kind of getting to a point where we may be alcoholic at GitHub because so many people ship every day. But
yeah.
That's I don't know whether anyone got that reference to a blog post. But there's an elephant in the room, and its name is the App Store, because this philosophy kind of falls down when, as much as we want to put no barriers in front of shipping and get code out there to people, there's this monolithic enterprise. I'm trying not to make any Star Wars references, which are in the way of you and your users, and it kind of just doesn't apply. So there are ways you can crowbar it in. I'm not going to go on record and saying fuck the App Store, but I think I just did. But there are ways you can make this apply, right? Instead of just deploying to your users, you can think of it as deploying to the review team. We deploy to the review team at least a couple times a week, maybe. We're not their favorite people, but that's kind of how it goes. And it gets back to the whole, if master is always shippable, it doesn't really matter. We can decide, okay, so maybe the app review team are kind of a bit pissed off with this, we'll leave it a couple of weeks. And then we'll go there. But there are tools like TestFlight, there's a t-shirt over there. There are tools like, there are other ways you can get betas and built out to users, and not have to worry about the App Store. So there are ways around it, but yeah. If you're a Mac app, I would thoroughly recommend just getting a developer ID and not bothering, but what am I? Exactly. Anyway, I thought I would just give you a little quick talk because I figured there may be some questions and we can have a bit of a discussion about it, but it doesn't matter if not. So.
Wait, can you tell us about some of the internal apps you guys were like?
Yes. So this is something I actually had in the talk and took out because I thought it didn't apply. But we have a whole suite of internal iOS and Mac applications, which we can deploy every day because we're an enterprise, right? Do you want to know about how we deploy them, or just how the apps work in general? I feel like you know them pretty well.
I thought some other people would be curious about some cool apps you guys build.
Sure. So we're big iOS users, and we're actually pretty big iOS developers internally, it turns out. And what we actually do is we have an internal app store we call the Speakeasy. There's kind of a joke in there somewhere if you get it. And we essentially run that as if it's, but not the app store, but we deploy to it kind of every day. Exactly, it's that. Silly, chill out. So our entire company gets updates pretty much daily on every application they're building, because we just deploy. And they love it because we always get new features internally. We have an app called Team. I'll show you some of you later. I can't really put it on film because I don't know, there's some secrets in it. Which is kind of like, it's an internal Twitter, which we can talk about what we're doing, but then it's also an entire idea system. GitHub is an entirely flat company, right? We have there's no bosses, no one tells me what to do. It's that cool. So no one knows that, there's no one who tells you what to do at GitHub, you get to work on whatever the hell you want. Literally, and it kind of works pretty well. And so what you do is, if you're kind of done working on something, you look at Team to see all the projects that are currently going on, to see what seems cool to go work on. And everyone has a voice on everything. Because we're big on being what we call asynchronous, because we have an awful lot of remote workers. There's no point in having any meetings, because someone who might have a thought about it wouldn't be there. So there's no point. There's literally no point in having a meeting. So we just put this in an asynchronous way. We put up essentially a markdown document into the app, which you can review at any point. So someone has this idea, they put it up, and then there's just a comment thread. And it turns out comment threads are pretty powerful in terms of just communicating. Because everything's logged, everyone can read back and get to any point where they are, figure out where the conversation is happening. Because it doesn't matter if I'm in Brighton 24 hours later, I've decided I'm not really interested in what's going on in the company right now, I just want to get my head down in code. Once I come out of that, I can then see what's going on and comment, and my voice hasn't been lost, right? There's still, my opinion's been heard. And that's the big deal, because the second you force someone to be somewhere, they're not coding, and they're not being productive. I don't know about you, but I used to have meetings, and I would then get out of the meeting and just not really want to do anything for the rest of the day. They kind of ruined everything.
Yep.
So that's the big one. We have internal chat apps, which are kind of cool.
When you're deploying them internally like that, because you deploy them to like an over-the-air, a custom over-the-air server.
So Speakeasy is just like a nice interface for our enterprise over-the-air install system.
You're not using like an HDM solution and pushing them out or something like that.
No, it's all push notification based, but that's all built into Speakeasy.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, so literally you'll get a push notification that says there's an updated team. Slide it. Done. It's actually ironically easier, drastically easier for us to deploy custom internal apps than it is to deploy software to the App Store.
Oh, right.
It's literally Hubot deploy. Are you guys familiar with Hubot at all?
No.
I feel like some people know. It's essentially a campfire robot. It's a bot that just sits in our campfire room, and we just use it like a command line. And so if I want to deploy a team, I just go Hubot deploy team. Bam, done. Everyone in the company now has the new team. It's pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
Any other questions?
I love Play.
Yeah, Play's pretty cool. That's my baby.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, I wrote Play.
Do you guys know about Play?
Play is our internal music system. So anyone in the company, wherever they are in the world, can queue up music to play. And we have it rigged up in the office, and then we stream it. And there are Mac apps, iPhone apps for you to manage the queue and listen to music wherever you are and kind of talk about it. Because music, we're kind of fairly musical as a company. And it's kind of fun to, take the piss out of whoever's playing Mariah Carey, or Dead Mouse for the 15 billionth time. It's kind of fun, and it's kind of important in a way of how we socialize. Yeah.
You guys have any articles or blog posts or anything about your automated submission?
Yes. Oh, I don't know about automated submission. We have an awful lot of blog posts and talks and this and that about how we work, which is kind of why I didn't do it here.
Right. Yeah.
It's like. If you Google, I think Zach has a bunch, right?
Zach Holman.
Sorry, yeah, Zach Holman. It's probably zachholman.com. He's written a lot about how we work. He's also been essentially on a world tour, talking about it everywhere. And there's a few videos of that, which is kind of fun. He also does a talk on Play, because he wrote the websites, and I did the apps. It's kind of fun. Any other questions? And now it's an open GitHub Q&A. No?